Friends, please pray with me. Loving God, we thank you for the light of your word. Open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to encounter you this morning as we engage with these sacred texts. Amen. So, recently, I read a magazine article that is put out by a group that does religious research. And the article gave a rather sad statistic for mainline churches. And it was written in the States, but I think that in Canada it's probably similar. And it said that the average congregation declined by 1/3% since the beginning of COVID. Now here's the thing. According to the article, this 1/3 decline of folks, these are not folks who can't get out to church anymore. And they're not folks who have lost their faith, but they're folks who still consider themselves to be church folks. They just don't show up anymore. Now, here at St. John Stevensville, we're missing a number of our folks who used to come as well, but we also have gained a number of folks, so that our attendance numbers, for the most part, have stayed fairly steady. But still, we notice our friends that are no longer here. And statistically, over the last year, we have heard about the nuns, the N-O-N-E-S, those who have no religious background or education about faith. And we have heard research about the dones, D-O-N-E-S, those who once came to church but for whatever reason are now just done with church. And now we have what they are naming as the as in U-M-M-S, like as in what to do. That kind of Those 1/3 folks who have disappeared from our pews are often those who really desire to be part of a church but are not active. And that's what this whole research paper was about. They are folks who have distanced themselves from a live faith community and are now struggling with how it is that they re-engage within community. And way back, during the Reformation, John Calvin called folks who were interested in reform, the reform movement, but couldn't commit to it, he didn't call them he called them Nicodemites. And of course, that was the story that we heard today from our gospel reading. The story of Nicodemus' encounter with Jesus. Now, I always find this particular story a bit of a sad one. Because Nicodemus, he's curious. He wants to meet Jesus. And he sneaks to see him under the cover of darkness. He sneaks through the darkness to encounter what we would consider to be the light of the world. And Jesus invites him into that light, but he sneaks away again, back into the darkness, not quite ready to declare his faith, not committed to openly have Jesus change his life. Although we will see him again in chapter 7 and again in chapter 19 at the burial, I find this particular part of his story somewhat sad. Now, the Gospel of John is brilliantly written. And there are multiple themes that are interwoven through the gospel account. And one such theme is often this interplay between darkness and light, representing the movement from unbelief to belief, from confusion to understanding. Hence the saying, it dawned on me. But in this encounter, Nicodemus is still in that confusion of unbelief. And he says to Jesus, how can these things be? And Jesus jokes with them a little and says, aren't you a great teacher of Israel and you don't understand? But then Jesus explains in a simple way the concept of being born again. That one must leave an old way they've been living and be born again into a new way of living. That one must learn to walk again and talk again and to grow in the love of Christ. Now, I would be really remiss to preach on this if I did not note that the term born again comes with a lot of modern day cultural baggage. One preacher noted that this phrase is often used to sort folks into opposed camps. In the extreme, one camp says, are you born again? To mean, are you one of us or are you not one of us? In the other extreme camp, they say, are you born again? To mean, are you one of those nut jobs? And both of those camps are wrong, and they are destructive. The rest of us, we live in the middle, trying to be faithful to our beliefs. And being born again is actually a wonderful metaphor. Jesus requires more than just believing with one's mind, more than just that detached intellectual faith. Being born again requires an act of faith, belief that comes from the heart, and that changes the way you live from that point onward. And it's not flashy. It's just a steady day after day after day. And Nicodemus, from our reading, he's still in that gestation stage, right? It's not that he has no faith, and it's not even that he has no faith in Jesus Christ. But at this point, his faith is immature or incomplete or too small to fully come into the light, and that he needs to be born again into the light so he can grow. And honestly, some folks gestate longer than others. It's also true, though, that once we are born into the light, we grow at different rates. Some folks will grow slow and steady, and some folks grow their faith in spurts. For those of you who have kids, do you remember like when they're little? And they always took that growth spurt, not at the beginning of September when you bought all their new clothes and all their new sneakers, but like the end of September or early October, and all of a sudden you got to buy not just indoor shoes but outdoor shoes and all that. They just sprout up. Well, some Christians, they go through growing phases where their faith just sprouts up. The thing is, you can't compare one person's journey to another person's journey. Just like kids all grow up at different rates, so do our faith. And it's the important thing, though, is that we continue to grow. Or perhaps I should say that it is important that we desire to continue to grow. Now, I mentioned that there are two other passages where Nicodemus is mentioned in the Gospel of John, and one of them is in chapter 7, where he makes this kind of half-effort attempt to defend Jesus to the other religious authorities. And the context of that is that folks are gathered for the Jewish festival of the tabernacle, or Sukkot, like S-U-K-K-O-T. I'm not sure how you pronounce that properly. My Greek and Hebrew is not great. Sukkot. Feast of the Tabernacles. And Jesus is teaching, and he is preaching, and as it happens, he manages to offend some of the religious authorities who want him arrested. And as those leaders gather, Nicodemus says, does our law condemn a man without hearing him first about what he has been doing? And the interesting part of that one-line encounter where it mentions Nicodemus is that he is identified as one of Jesus' numbers. And then the last time we hear about Nicodemus is after the crucifixion, where he is helping Joseph of Arimathea, who is also identified as a secret follower of Jesus. He's helping him with the burial of Jesus' body when they take it down from the cross. And in chapter 19 of the Gospel of John, it says that he brings this extraordinary amount of burial spices to prepare the body. 34 kilograms or 75 pounds. And in this passage, he is identified as the one who first came to Jesus by night. Yet here he is, ritually attending to the body of Jesus, whom the authorities have just executed as a criminal. And I am sure that did not go unnoticed. Was this the moment that Nicodemus stepped fully into the light? Kierkegaard once said that life must be lived forward but can only be understood backwards. It's only in retrospect sometimes when we realize or we fully understand our growth. Nicodemus, he's an interesting fellow, and I wish we knew more about him, or more about him particularly after the resurrection. Some traditions say that his relics are kept with St. Stephen the Martyr. I'm not a relic historian. I don't know. But why we really remember Nicodemus is because he was part of this wonderful discourse, this conversation from his encounter with Jesus. And we leave the passage this morning with that greatest of affirmation of love that was ever written. John 3:16, for God so loved the world. That was the message that Jesus wanted Nicodemus to fully understand. That God so loved the world that God sent Jesus, just like we did with the kids. That whosoever should believe in Jesus will not perish but will have everlasting life, because God so loved the world. And then theologians come around and they say, God loved the world, but. No buts. In case anyone would argue otherwise. John 3:17 is pretty clear that Jesus did not come into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be what? Saved. That is love in action. And when we are born again, like the term, not like the term, whatever, when we go through that conversion, when we go through that life-changing moment, that is the love that our lives are supposed to project, both publicly and privately. Now, I am sad when I read articles like I talked about at the beginning. I am sad about those who are statistically and religiously categorized as nuns. It would be very sad to have never known the welcome of a faith community. And I'm even sadder, I have to say, about the duns. Those who have left the church with no intention of ever returning. But it's the ums that are a challenge. How do we help these folks re-engage with a faith community? Because faith needs a community to support growth. Can we, here at St. John Stevensville, on this day when we're going to have our annual meeting and we're going to review things that went before and we're going to talk about things that go forward, can we be that community who welcomes folks who are seeking back to the church? And I think that the re-engagement starts not with just an invitation to come, but the invitation to come with you, to come with me, to sit with you, to be introduced to other members at coffee time, and so on and so forth. There are a variety of events and activities beyond Sunday morning that happen to build community, not just here, but also down at the Embrace Center. And that's so important as well. Opportunities for people to encounter Jesus in our midst. And actually, after worship today, and after we go out and we have our lunch and people set up for the meeting and we come back in, Victoria, as the communication coordinator, has put together this little quick video. And it's all the things that we have done together as a community in the last year. And when I watched that video, I did a little preview, I saw the love of Jesus shining through our community. And I saw folks who love God and are continuing to grow in their faith. We grow, we walk, we talk. And friends, may we be bold enough during this Lenten season and into Easter and beyond. Be bold enough to let Jesus' light shine through us. Thanks be to God. Amen.